see?
good.
Perfect.
Yes.
So
Perfect. Now full screen.
yeah, perfect. Thank you. So now what we would like to do is introduce you, now that we've done everything about why we're doing it, introduce you to what we've done. And Nico and I will exchange views on this one. So we'll start off with the introduction of the scope and things that we've done, and then go into the concept paper itself and the structure of the concept paper. And that would be one of the deliverables that you will receive and will be openly accessible to all of you. So I'll start off with the scope and objectives, and then I'll hand over to Nico to talk a bit about this OpenODD structure and the deliverables. So hopefully this moves. Okay,
Yep.
so I won't go through the figure itself again. You've already know the background, but where does OpenODD fit in terms of that pipeline? So as I said earlier, the test environment could be either simulation or test track or real world. So the aim of ASAM OpenODD at a minimum is to create a format that is capable of representing the defined operational design domain for automated driving systems for a simulation-based testing approach. That's the bare minimum. If we can do for test track and real world testing also, that's an add-on added benefit for us. So what we wanted to do was capable of representing the ODD. What does that mean in terms of the different types of features that we need for a language? So we came up with this figure as a project group as to what we would like to achieve if we had infinite time and infinite resources for ASAM OpenODD. So we created all these features that we would like to have. Obviously, we don't have infinite features and infinite time, infinite resources and infinite time. So we had to pick and select which were the ones that we absolutely would like to do in the first version of the concept paper and the standard. So at the core of the scope of ASAM OpenODD is the ODD specification itself. That would be using the taxonomy and the ontology of the ODD definition. However, there's a big requirement from the safety assurance work that we need to somehow be able to support and define metrics, support and define queries, support and define uncertainties for all the reasons that we've already identified. So metrics, uncertainty, and queries and even exposure probabilities are some things that we have incorporated within the scope of the first version of the OpenODD concept paper and hopefully the standard itself. So the scope itself is not just the green box. The scope is the green box and all the boxes actually. But in the first versions of our work, we've captured the green box, which is the OpenODD ODD specification, the uncertainty, the metrics, the queries, and the exposure. Now, if we want to do all this, we need to somehow structure the project in a way that all of them are happening at the right time. So we split the project into 4 work packages essentially. The first work package was focusing on attributes. As we said earlier, there are quite a few taxonomies that are out there. We wanted to ensure that we've got alignment across all of them, and also with the ongoing ASAM work of ASAM OpenX ontology project. Work package 2 focused mostly on the format and the specification, where work package 3 went into the details of the metrics, and work package 4 started talking about uncertainty. And we've got Jason, who'll be talking about work package 2. We've got Bernard, who's talking about metrics, and Eddie about uncertainty later in the call. So how did the whole workflow happen? So when we were trying to come up with the concept paper, which is our end goal here, what we did was we started off with user stories and then create a set of requirements from those user stories. One of the important aspects over here was the requirements sometimes can be misinterpreted by different people or interpreted differently. So what we did was we created examples for each of those requirements, and we used those examples to illustrate the concept in 2 example syntaxes. And we'll see a bit about this in the next slide. And at the end of the day, we did not capture everything. So we had to we still had a few open issues, which we've highlighted in the concept paper. And today we are here with the concept paper itself. So what does that mean in terms of what you will see in the concept paper. So here, let's look at one of the requirements we had. We had a requirement that the language needs to be human readable as well as machine readable. So what we created was, for this requirement, we created a sample use case. And that use case was then illustrated in two syntaxes. So here you see a syntax one, which says keep road equal to motorway. And here you see a more human readable natural language, which is suitable motorway, except in rain, etc. So for every requirement in the concept paper, you will have a requirement, a use case, and the example in two different syntaxes. So what you will get as the deliverable of the concept paper is the concept paper itself. Concept project is the concept paper itself with all the requirements illustrated in two example syntaxes. But we also have provided you with an ontology web app, which is an online portal where the detailed ODD attributes can be discussed, can be illustrated, and you can also see their ontological relationships. The link to this web app is actually embedded within the concept paper itself. So if you are interested in looking into this also, you can absolutely do that. It's hosted by ASAM at one of their portals. So I'll stop here and I'll hand over to Nico to talk us through the concept paper structure.
Yes, so let me just then share that so I can switch through the slides.
Perfect.
So you should be able to see that now.
Yes.
So yes. So pretty much, thank you for presenting how we approached everything and how we approached the project. So pretty much, the whole concept paper will guide you through the work results, or the whole concept paper is one of the working results from the concept project. And obviously, there's a foreword which just gives you the usual introduction, not as in detail as Peter did before, but just to give a short overview. I think then the first really interesting section towards ODDs is the introduction, where we explain the overview, why ODDs are important, how we, what conventions we use within the concept paper. And then I think one of the very interesting sections is understanding ODDs, which is 2.4, where we explain all the differences between ODs and ODDs and what's the difference between an ODD and a scenario, giving a few examples. So this is really worth looking at. Yeah, and this is pretty much this, which is shown here. And we also will give an example in the concept paper, but you don't worry, you don't have to jump there yet. We will show the example later on as well, in a bit different way, but it is really similar to that, to show what is the difference between an ODD and a scenario. And yeah. So then obviously the concept paper will give you an insight on what ASAM OpenODD will relate to in terms of ASAM standards and other standards, and what we considered while we developed that concept paper, because our main goal was not to create a competitive standard initiative, but a one that can fit into the whole ODD environment that is currently being created worldwide with all the standardization organizations. And that's why we said we need that OpenODD language to be as adaptable as possible and to incorporate all the other initiatives that are out there. And then, as said before, the chapter 4 is all about the language and the format that will form the OpenODD representation. So you can represent everything in a formal and machine readable way. Jason will talk a bit about that later. We have the attributes, and one of the outcomes from the attributes work package is that mentioned web app, which gives you an example on how an ODD taxonomy could look like. This is not complete yet, and that's not the requirement to that, but it serves as an example, and we will further refine that and align that with OpenX ontology. And in the end, we want to use OpenX ontology for OpenODD as well. So we have that aligned throughout the whole OpenX standard suite, which will then, of course, put all the puzzle pieces together. Then we have the metrics chapter, which is one of the applications using ASAM OpenODD, how you can use ASAM OpenODD within the whole scenario-based testing workflow to create metrics, to use them, and what they are good for. And Bernhard will talk about that, as he was the work package lead for this package, and give you a lot more insight towards that. And then we have the one too much. Oh, no, there are two coming at once. So the uncertainty representation, we said it is, as the world out there is not black and white, and you can't say for sure that there will never be rain at a certain point, or that there will never be pedestrian at one road. We said, okay, it's important that ASAM OpenODD is capable of representing uncertainties and probabilities if this is necessary. And Edward, he was the work package lead for this one, will give you insights on what does that mean and what is the impact of that. And then we said, okay, and another one is queries. And here we are coming to the chapters that have blocks without that represent blocks in the colorful brick image you saw before, that were not represented by any work package because limited resources. But still they deserve the chapter and are things we are going to look at in the follow-up standardization project or projects. Depends on how many resources we get to develop all of these things. Yeah, and this pretty much goes on for all the other boxes as well. You will find short abstracts on what they mean and how they relate to ODDs and what their impact towards an ODD specification would be. And with that, thanks a lot for your attention. Now we are open to questions. And what I would do is pretty much open the chat and read out the questions we received so far. And Siddhartha and I, and hopefully some of the other presenters will then chime in to answer those questions. And the first question is from Giacomo, and his question is the scope also the usage of the ODD language to prepare all the data for the machine learning process? I think that's an interesting question.
Okay, yeah, so essentially, Giacomo, you could look at the use of the ASAM OpenODD for scenario generation, and the scenarios will then be used for the preparing the data for machine learning. So in a sense, we could say yes, but also no, because OpenODD itself is not the data that you will use for scenario for your training of the ML systems or algorithms. It's how you use the OpenODD language to generate the scenarios that you will then use for the training of ML algorithms.
Yes. So I think to add to this is you can view the ODD specification as part of the ADS specification, which will of course help you select what data is necessary and what not. So the second question we got is, to conclude ODD, when we design the simulation scenarios, do we need to consider all ODD elements, permutations, and combination? Otherwise, how can we say we find the ODD boundary? But is it possible to cover everything?
Okay, I would give you an answer from my experience, but I think a lot of people out there are trying to find an answer to this exact question. Shangwei, to answer the first bit is, no, you don't have to cover all ODD attributes at all in every scenario that you have. You can absolutely focus your scenario generation process and certain attributes, and that would be driven by the way you do your scenario generation methodology. And some cases you tend to focus on some aspects, some cases you tend to focus on other aspect. For example, if you're trying to test your perception system, then your environmental part and the dynamic element part of this ODD specification becomes very crucial. But if you're trying to test your planning algorithm, then your scenery part becomes very crucial. So depending upon what you're trying to do, it would your focus on the ODD attributes would be different. So in a way, I would say it's not always necessary to use all the attributes. It's a function of your test objective. It's a function of what you're trying to test.
Yes, perfect. And I think that was all the questions we received so far. And we are pretty much very, very good on time. So we will jump into a short coffee break. So grab something to drink, refresh, and we'll be back in 10 minutes. So let me share the agenda again so you know what's coming up. So you should be able to see the agenda now. So we are now at the short break, and we will continue then with the technical concepts of ODDs, which will then, Siddhartha, you will present this to us. And then we will jump into further details of the concept paper as I teased before. And then in the end, I will give you an example on how OpenODD will jump into the OpenX family, and of course the next steps, including the OpenX harmonization and how to get involved and what is coming up next year with OpenODD. So looking forward to have you back in 10 minutes.